gosh, like, is this the limit? Like, is this my limit? Like,
If you're a professional, the goal is to play next month, next year, next decade.
so I never get shy to pull the trigger when I play live cash. I mean, downswings are really, really tough. It's really easy to lose 10 buy-ins. I don't think people realize.
Today, I'm bringing to you a conversation with poker coaching pro, YouTube vlogger, and longtime poker student, JWIN. A couple of years ago, Jay decided to quit his job making $180,000 a year in the world of tech to pursue poker on a full-time basis. In those years, he's climbed up the ranks of cash games, battled in some of the highest stakes, is a regular on The Lodge and other various poker streams, has went deep in the WSOP main event this year, which was quite the incredible sweat for me, and has by and large been a very successful poker player. As somebody who has traveled with Jay regularly, I can say that there's almost nobody on the face of the planet that loves poker as much as that dude. As a matter of fact, I can't think of anyone who loves poker more than Jay. At our last trip together, despite traveling all day the night before, going on no sleep, what's the first thing dude does as he arrives at our pad? He goes straight to the casino, and because nothing else is running, he plays like 1-2 when his normal stakes, are 10-20, 25-50. The dude just genuinely loves playing poker. And so today, it is an absolute honor and privilege to bring to you my conversation with the one and only JWIN. Mr. J, welcome to the podcast, sir. How you doing?
Mr. Brad, thanks for having me. I'm doing pretty good, man.
That's good to hear.
Ups and downs in this year, but just try to be optimistic every day and get to work.
I think that's the nature of the poker lifestyle, right? You can't have the triumphs without the suffering and the agony of defeat, and they kind of go together hand in hand.
For sure.
Speaking of your journey and your career through poker, typically start out this show by asking about your story. How did you fall into the world of poker initially, right? That led you to quitting your job and starting a vlog and just immersing yourself in this kind of crazy world of card playing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start from the beginning, and I'll try to keep the story as concise and short as possible. But right now I'm 37. I'm a fairly late bloomer in the poker world. But after college, I went straight into the corporate world and worked for approximately like 8 years or so. And roughly around like late 2019, I went to one of my siblings. I went to visit my siblings in Virginia, and they have a weekly game, just $20, $40 cash games type of thing. Siblings and their plus ones, boyfriends, wives, girlfriends, husbands, that kind of thing. And we all got together. We were playing during Thanksgiving. And I was like, holy smokes, I really enjoy poker. That was super fun. And then just coincidentally, a week later, I had a trip lined up to Vegas already. And I played my first casino game. It was like a 2-5 game. I literally only had $500 on me. And I made money in that one game. I just played super, super tight, got really lucky, and then just took my winnings and left. And I just remember leaving that trip and telling myself, I really enjoy poker. That's really, really fun. So, I do what a lot of people do. I go home, I start Googling poker strategy, YouTube, start YouTubing poker strategy. And I watch all of these popular vloggers and influencers. And I was like, this game is really, really, really cool. So first thing I did was told myself that I wanted to play poker more. And I went on one of the popular training sites, created a membership for myself. And yeah, that was December of 2019. And ever since then, just kept playing. And I think like maybe a year and a half after that, poker just kind of took off for me and decided to go full time.
Yeah. So this is only, within the last 4 years, right? So it's not super long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
I guess let's start by asking, when you're playing with your cousins, what was it about poker that really grabbed you? Because, essentially we're talking about what is a monumental shift in career ambition.
For sure.
Where you're doing the corporate gig, working in tech, I believe. Yeah.
Yep.
And kind of eventually this leads to you leaving your career in tech to become a professional poker player. So that first moment, when you're playing with your cousins, what was it about the game that kind of pulled you in, that fascinated you?
You know, um, I remember we were drinking, having a good time, bonding, and because of some of my life decisions, just deciding to move away, go on my own. Physically, I wasn't close to my siblings, and so I missed out on a lot. So while they're having this weekly home game, I just never attend because I'm never there. And just being there, drinking with them, having a good time, like splashing around. Like no one knew how to play poker. We just splashed. You know what I mean? Like gut draw, all in, that kind of thing. Um, but yeah, like just playing, like the social atmosphere, everyone laughing, everyone sweating, like an all in with some sort of big draw. Like that was just so fun to me. And of course, later on, like the income potential of the game was really, really fascinating, and the ability to essentially run your own business because it's not just a playing part, but you can play, you can coach, you can create content, you can run games. There's a lot of ways to make money in poker. And with my education and my corporate background, I just felt like there was multiple streams of income that I can take advantage of. And but yeah, first and foremost, just having a natural love for the game. Like I just love playing the game. I never felt like waking up on a Monday morning was dreadful. That's when I start my study schedule. And I just always looked forward to Monday morning. And unfortunately, with my work, I was well paid and everything like that. And I was very, very fortunate, but I didn't look forward to Mondays. And I knew that at some point I wanted to do something on my own. So it just, the timing was just excellent and great. And yeah, it's been quite an adventure, but no regrets.
Yeah, and when you first started taking poker a little bit more seriously and learning and kind of going down that path and recognizing like, wow, like, this wasn't kind of a one-shot deal with my cousins, my family. I actually
Yeah.
do like just enjoy playing this game outright.
Hmm.
Tell me about, I know you're married and
Yeah.
you recently had a child. So tell me about conversation, with your wife as it related to just immersing yourself into the world of poker, going deeper, learning, growing, and then, eventually kind of taking the plunge.
Yeah. And I've always had hobbies, right? And so 10, 20, 30 hours away from the home is fairly normal. But in that first year of playing, and as soon as I started playing, and I got, from the casino, I got back to Austin, and I researched card rooms, which we have a few in the city. I started playing 1-2 live cash games pretty regularly, and making like anywhere between $2,000 to $4,000 a month for several months before COVID started, and it was just super super fun. And then once COVID happened, I decided to uh, I didn't want to quit, and I already had this training membership, so I wanted to keep studying and keep getting better at the game. I decided to play online, and there's a few options available online, and that year it allowed me to put in so much volume. I think I put in a crazy like 700,000 hands that year. So I learned a lot, made so many mistakes, clearly a losing player that year. But it allowed me to get so much volume and so much experience in that. It was a blessing that later on that year when card rooms started opening again, the game became incredibly slow for me, meaning like I was like I always knew where I was at with those 1-2 games, and allowed me to just move up really fast, like 1-3, 2-5, and then so forth. But at the point where I was just, like it just became very, very evident that the financial upside, the personal time management upside, the life balance upside, and really just a passion upside, like all the upsides made a lot of sense, where I had that conversation with my wife, and that I wanted to go, and her thing was like, let's go for it. But could we just make enough for where we had a strong emergency fund? And I was like, that's very, very fair. So it took me another roughly like 6 months or so. It took me about 7 months that year. I remember it was like January to July. And then once we got to that July, also found out my wife was pregnant. I was just like, oh, this is perfect timing. Like, I'm going to quit my job and then go do this thing full time. And so, yeah, so it's been, I think, approaching 2 years now since we made that decision.
Nice.
Yep.
I think for most of us, at least for me, when you say, "Oh, it's perfect timing," my wife is pregnant, right? Like I automatically get the sense of like dread and like, holy shit, I don't know if this is perfect timing or not.
Yeah.
Because having a child, it, as a parent myself, I know
Mhm.
that feeling of responsibility and just is exponentially increased when you introduce another tiny living, breathing, pooping
For
machine
sure.
into the
Yeah.
world that you're responsible for, which is, yeah, it's a terrifying responsibility, to be honest.
Yeah. Like one of the, like a lot of people ask me, oh, should I quit my job and go pro? And almost every single person I talk to, my answer is no. Like I just ask them simple questions like, do you like your job? And if the answer is, yeah, I reasonably like my job, are you making money in poker? Yeah. Like, do you enjoy that balance between doing a job you like and getting to play poker for fun profitably? When people say yes, I'm like, that's that's really the dream right there. You know what I mean? Because sometimes playing poker full time can be pretty dreadful and people can lose interest in the game pretty easily. But if you're able to have a great balance between your day job and be able to play poker for fun and you do it profitably, that's such a dream. For me, because I played for like almost for over 2 years, actually, I played for over 2 years profitably and had a really good paying job and was able to build up such a nice emergency fund. I didn't dread, like going out. Like obviously I was definitely scared in the beginning. Like, what if I don't perform? But I had such a nice data sample set that I thought I would be okay. Of course, since then I've had two different downswings. I'm in a downswing of my own right now. But again, I think like having that patience in the beginning, and so much thanks to my wife for telling me to build up that emergency fund, because downswings are eventually going to happen. Like it doesn't matter if you're the best player. They're going to happen. And having that financial security to know that you can go months without an income, like it's going to help your poker career for sure. So I've been lucky that I took my time to go pro instead of just saying, okay, like I'm a year profitable, I'm just going to go full time.
Yeah, I mean, essentially having some sort of safety net as a
Yes.
professional poker player is critically important. Whether that safety net is a job that is just generating monthly income that you can pay your bills and
Mm-hmm.
pay your way through life and keep track of your responsibilities,
Yeah.
or you save up money and have a safety net just whenever the inevitable downswing occurs, because as you said, it's not an avoidable type of thing as a professional poker player. You are, especially because your chosen path has been through the live arena, right, where
Yep.
you get 30-35 hands an hour and
Mm-hmm.
40 hours a week, and you've managed to play a ginormous sample size of like 1,300 or 1,400 hands, which anything can happen in 1,300 or 1,400 hands, especially, you play in the streets of Texas.
Yeah.
So those games are typically very, very deep. It doesn't take losing one or two 700 or 800 big blind pots in a week to basically just wreck your week, right? I think
Oh, for sure. Yep.
most
Mm-hmm.
weeks or months hinge on 5 or 6 gigantic pots that you're going to play.
Yep.
And if you come out ahead, you have a great month. And if you come out behind, you typically have a losing month. And that's just, the reality of
Yeah.
live poker,
Yeah. I think I did the math, like putting in good volume, I'll get roughly around 40,000 hands a year. And I went to the prime dope variance calculator. And even for someone who's winning the game at 10 BB per hour, and I know a crusher is going to win it closer to 24, but there was such a large percentage where you can just have large swings. You know what I mean? Like 40,000 is a reasonable sample, but a lot can happen within that 40,000 hand sample set. So,
yeah,
um,
it goes
mm-hmm.
to show too, I think in live poker, you can probably win 20 to 40 BBs per 100
Mm-hmm.
and maybe upwards to 50 or 60, depending on, your skill level and the just how good the game is, essentially.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And it goes to show how you can't take any hand off in live poker. You can't drop your guard. You can't drop your attention for even a split second when you're playing, because you don't get to achieve a 40 or 50 BB per 100 win rate watching Netflix on your phone while you're just sitting at the table and
Yeah.
waiting for something quoting good to happen to you.
Brad, one of the things that you said that I'll never forget is something along the lines of like the margin in poker is so slim, especially once you get to a certain level, that you can't afford to make a mistake because that hand might not come again, or making a mistake that leads to a gigantic loss that should have been a small loss or a small win or something like that. it's going to stick with you in that that data set. So, for me, I always try to stay present in the hand, but yeah, that's just one of the things you mentioned that it's kind of always left an impression on me that the margin in poker is just always like the margin in poker is very slim and you can't afford to play suboptimal.
Yeah, you just can't,
Yeah.
And with that said, going back into your story, so you quit a high paying job, right? You're making like 200K a year, something along those lines. How long had you been in that field before you transitioned out?
So high level, I graduated, worked at Apple for 7 years, went back to business school, and then get recruited to join a tech startup that ended up being a unicorn. I was number 9 of a company that's now worth around $4 billion. So, my equity did really, really well. Funny enough, I left before the company blew up, so I lost a ton of equity. But I took what we're referring to right now. Like I took a pretty high paying position at a marketing company, serving as the number 2 of that company.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't necessarily in marketing before. My whole experience has been in like sales and operations and planning and that kind of stuff. But I came into a marketing company and I worked there for about 2.5 years. But in total, I worked for roughly around like 10 or 11 years before going into poker.
Yeah, so pretty big commitment, to your life, right? Like 10 or 11 years. That's a good chunk of time to invest into something before you change jobs. And as you change jobs into playing poker professionally, tell me about kind of your strategy as it related to making that transition. Because again, like lots of things have to go right and lots of things have to be planned for. And you mentioned multiple revenue streams, which I'm assuming is sort of the genesis of your poker vlog.
Yeah, like so the first part of your question, just want to make sure I heard you correctly. So the first part of your question is like, what was my strategy going full time?
Yeah. What was your kind of holistic strategy outside of just showing up, playing cards, making money?
Yeah, absolutely. So I knew that I wanted to dedicate something that like, like roughly around 20% of my week at least to studying. So I try to study every single morning. And then in terms of playing, I try to stick to a 4 live session a week. I think with this type of sessions that I playing like 5 or 6 times a week, I get quick burnout. So I try to stick with 4. And then on top of that, I also try to play roughly around 500 hands online a week. That just allows me to really, build up my database and try to find my leaks in a way that's really, really difficult to play online. Then outside of that, there's, the way I structure my week, there's certain days that I work on my other income streams. But yeah, I just try to batch it up. Like, for example, Sunday is the only day that I work on social media. If I don't work on social media, I just have agreement to myself that I never do social media on any other day. So if I'm going to do it, it's only Sunday. And that allows me to be a poker player on days that I'm supposed to be a poker player. I just be a poker player. And on the one day that I can be a social media strategist, that's the day that I focus on, building my social media and then, driving affiliate sales that way.
Yeah, it's I will say from my perspective, and for the YouTube watcher or the podcast listener as well, you probably recognize that I haven't put out a lot of interview episodes in the past like year and a half, right? Michael Loncar a few months ago, which kind of he reached out to me and we made it happen. But the reality is, like, for the past year and a half, I haven't felt like I had a day like Sunday or a day to dedicate to content creation. Frankly, the CFP, the CBG Wolves that was created a couple of years ago, when I started that project, I verbalized, I know that I said out loud that, this is going to be a gigantic pain in the ass. There's going to be troubles and problems and things that I'm going to have to deal with that I can't even imagine right now. And so like, I recognized that it was going to be difficult, and boy, was I right? Was I ever right? And, I think that just kind of imagining, playing poker full time, coaching full time, creating content full time, there's only so many hours in the day. And if I want to remain a sane human being, right, that doesn't, that is happy with his existence in the world, then you have to have time for yourself too, right? Like you mentioned, Sundays are for social media, and that you study 20% of the time and you go play poker, right? Well, you also have to spend time with your family. You also have to spend time with your friends. You got to carve out time for some sort of hobby or recreation that isn't playing poker, has nothing to do with poker, just so that you maintain your sanity. And yeah, it's juggling all of these balls at the same time. At least for me, I'm not a great juggler. Like I'm not good at juggling all those balls.
Yeah,
So
same.
I just kind of, one of the balls in the air, I zoomed way in, and it was the wolf program, and kind of all the other balls just kind of splatted here and there. And I was like, whatever, like I'll deal with that, when the time comes. But yeah, like, when you endeavored to create a YouTube channel, to have a social media strategy, to pursue these other revenue streams, right? That is that it's a thing that clearly is, in theory, sounds great, right? But it's also a lot of work. Like, it is a lot of energy that you have to invest in doing it, and you got to be consistent. And with your vlog, you did an incredibly good job of putting out really high level content that is consumable, that's watchable. You built up an audience on YouTube very, very quickly. But I know too, right? Like, your vlog's kind of taking a back seat to playing poker, pursuing greatness, chasing poker greatness, right? Over the past year. And again, there's only so many hours in the day, right? So where do those hours get allocated? And sometimes these things kind of just, they get squeezed out.
Yeah. I mean, your analogy with the balls is so right. And, to make it even more vividly clear, it's almost like juggling eggs, because you don't want to let an egg drop. It's going to, you know what I mean? And so you just try to deal with one egg at a time.
Yeah.
I
but when it does,
just,
right? It's hard putting it's hard putting the yolk back in the shell, right? It's a really big pain in the ass cleaning that egg up once it's
right
on the ground.
Yeah. And with the YouTube stuff, like, I got really lucky. I think working in marketing for 2.5 years, I had a really strong sense in terms of how to, like, strategize this stuff and how to package things together and deliver it. And so, to build my audience, it took me 5 months to build it to, like, 5 or 6 months to build it to 12,000 people. And, like, it was a nice little revenue stream. The affiliate portion of it did really, really well. And funny enough, I still get paid a reasonable amount every single month, even though I haven't put out a video in about 10 months now. But life happens. My mom gets sick in October, and immediately, I have to start shifting my attention. And then I go through a couple of downswings this year. And so, yeah, the social media stuff just becomes like super backseat.
How is your mom these days?
Yeah, she's so just really, really high level. Like, now I'm super comfortable to talk about it, but she got a stage 3 cancer with about a 40% chance to survive. 40% doesn't sound so bad, but if you're the son of somebody who has stage 3 with 40%, that 60% sounds really, really daunting. But long story short, they got the cancer out, and she has less than a 1% chance for remission. So she's healthy, and gosh, like, Brad, you don't know her, but I'm telling you, she's a different person. Like, I'll FaceTime her, and then she'll be in the middle. She's from, we were from New York, by the way, but I'll FaceTime her, and she's in the middle of Manhattan with her girlfriends. And I'm like, who are these people? And who are you? Like, you've never hung out in Manhattan by yourself, but I have no idea what she's doing. But it's like she has a second lease on life, and she's just a completely different person for the better. She's so much more social. She's super appreciative, and no longer in like a pattern of life. You know what I mean? Like, she's really pushing the boundaries of what you can get from life. And all of my brothers and I, we love it. Like, she's a new person, but in such a great way. But yeah, to answer your question, she's doing great.
That's great to hear, man. Really good to hear. And yeah, like sometimes these events that are clearly, when they go down, are just huge negatives and very traumatic and very stressful and very painful. And there's lots of suffering, that the ripple effect from, your mom gets sick, and then everybody that knows your mom and loves your mom and that she has impacted in her life, that it ripples out to all of those people. And sometimes, when you get a positive outcome, it just disrupts your previous way of life, to where you're like, oh, like I realized that I was kind of like wasting a lot of time. And
Yep.
if things kind of went a different direction, I would have wasted a lot of time and had
Yeah.
never had an opportunity to do something different, to go up and pursue the things that I'm passionate about, or to, you know, chase joy, chase happiness on a regular
Yep.
basis. And it can be a wake up call in a very, very good way. So yeah, I think that we can probably all um, pinpoint moments in our lives where something happened that changed the trajectory of our life for what is ultimately the better, even if that situation wasn't at the time kind of a positive or a good thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. For sure.
So, you know, you've talked about, you know, being on a downswing, talked about the path, chasing poker greatness. And so tell me about your inner struggles, you know, maybe negative self-talk as you're going through these hardships down the path
Mm-hmm.
of playing poker. What is your inner talks? What does the negativity kind of sound like
Oh
you're battling?
gosh. Yeah. Yeah. I'll just think about like my last two downswings. So, you know, I don't think it's a coincidence, but like when my mom was going through her stuff the first couple of months, I felt like I used poker as like an outlet. You know what I mean? Like my son is just a few months now. It's incredibly difficult being a first time father and then juggling poker, which is not an 8 to 5 job. You know, a lot of times you're at night. And so it can be a lonely sport, but there's a lot of different things about poker. Um, and then I started using poker as an outlet to like release my frustration. You know what I mean? Which I know a lot of people can do, but for me, it just led to what was, yeah, actually still, but that was just by far the worst downswing I ever faced. And it was like really, really difficult. It took me about 3 months to get out of it, you know, to get back to that break even point. But, you know, I just remember like, oh, that was like extremely tough. And um, in terms of like the negative self talk, gosh, like if anybody ever tells you that, you know, I watch all these like great players and stuff, and when they, you know, whenever these great players get interviewed and they say something along the lines, you know, they maybe get a question like, have you ever thought about quitting? And almost all of them are like, yes. I get that feeling on a regular basis. It's like, I got it. Like at that moment, I was just like, I don't, you know, you start getting imposter syndrome. Nothing you accomplished in the past mattered. All you think is for the last 90 days, it feels like I'm the worst player in the world and that there's nothing I can do to get out of this. And, you know, those are like real human emotions. And um, oddly enough, it's not even the fact that like you're running bad anymore. Now you're playing bad, right? Because you're just dealing with negative emotions and you're putting on plays that you've never ever studied before. You're just randomly clicking buttons. And
Or
you're
you lose
making stuff
discipline.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You start maybe opening 2 pips too wide, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
That sort of downward spiral of, well,
exactly.
if I'm playing my A game and that's not working, or like whatever it is that I'm doing just is going against me, then I think the natural human inclination is to change strategies, right? It's to
Mhm.
try something a little bit different, even if, you know, what you did has been working for a year and, you know, you just hit the wrong side of card distribution or
Yeah.
variance or whatever it is. It's easy, like once you lose confidence and once you start spiraling out of control, and then you're like taking your game apart and doing different things than you used to do, it can be hard to put yourself back together again and get back to the place that you were. But it's, yeah, that is a very scary and just terrifying situation to find yourself in.
Yeah. Um, and in contrast, I'm going through a downswing right now, but in contrast, you know, the self-talk isn't nearly as bad. It's not like, oh, I suck, right? I don't say that to myself right now. It's just more so of like, okay, interesting. Like I've had a really bad session today, but did I play well? Like, hey, okay, I made 1 or 2 big mistakes here and there, but if I play like this long term, I'll be okay. So, you know, it's just a matter of, all right, I'm not playing my best, but I'm also not playing bad. So I can be appreciative of that. But at the same time, it's like if I play a live stream, there's tape that I can study. I'm building up an online database. So as long as I'm consistent with what I'm executing in live cash, I can go back to my database and really, really look into the spots that I'm losing money in and tell myself, okay, great. Like these are probably the spots that I'm losing in live cash. But then also believing that I'm not running well in big spots, right? And that, hey, if I just put in enough volume, I'll be okay. So much different self-talk this downswing as opposed to the one at the beginning of the year.
Good. That's great to hear. And what you said is like, it's so critical for the listener or the watcher to understand it and recognize. You're playing online, you're creating a data set to where you can review that data set to see how you're doing in these various scenarios. And when you have this big data set that you can look at to say, oh, I actually do play this spot, we'll just say 3-bet pot in position as a pre-flop caller. I'm winning in this spot online. So like I'm playing this spot quite well online over a big data set. I understand what's going on. I have a just really good technical understanding of how it works. I understand the mistakes that live players make that, I can take advantage of and adjust my strategy accordingly. Then if you get stacked 5 times in a week playing live poker as the pre-flop caller in a 3-bet pot when you're in position, then you can maintain confidence that, like it may have gone really poorly this week playing live, but sample size very small. I don't get a lot of volume playing live. Yep. I can fall back on this data set that I put together online that essentially is informing me, hey, I do know what's going on at this node. I don't need to change anything. Stay consistent and good things will happen over time. Just, stay the course. And, that's an incredibly comforting and valuable thing to maintain confidence and to not, be all wishy-washy with your strategy when things get tough.
Yeah, what you just mentioned is like one of the biggest realizations I've had. And I feel like a lot of the listeners who only play live cash, what's really difficult is that when things aren't going well, it's extremely difficult for live cash players to just put their finger on it and be able to say, this is the reason why I'm not doing well. Because in live cash, you really just you're not able to record the variables as well as someone who's playing online, right? Who has third-party software that can tell them exactly what they're looking at. So for example, I think a lot of people would think that like a 3-bet pot out of position as the raiser is a very difficult spot. But in my database, I just crushed that spot. And when I speak to other online players and we compare our stat in that very specific configuration, I feel overwhelmingly positive. And so I never get shy to pull the trigger when I play live cash. It doesn't matter how great my opponent is. I don't get afraid to isolate them because, hey, I just know that over a large sample, I do very well in that spot. Conversely, 2-bet pots out of position as a pre-flop caller, like there's some strats that maybe I'm not using the right size, but I'm starting to look at like thousands and thousands of hands online where I'm actually losing in this spot. And like, this is a very specific spot that I shouldn't. And my peers are showing me numbers that they're winning the spot. And so on the one side, I feel discouraged because, I'm not winning that spot. And most likely those results are translating in my live cash downswing. But on the bright side, I actually can say, you know what? This is one of the reasons why I'm on a downswing, because this is a spot that happens all the time, but I'm actually losing in it. So it's just perpetuating my losses over time. But it's extremely comforting, like you mentioned, that I can actually say, hey, there's 4 or 5 things I need to work on to be a better poker player. And this is definitively one of them.
Right. And when you talked about your, 20% study time, well, now your study time is targeted. Now it's targeted to any sort of deficiency or inefficiency in your game, which just makes that study time ultimately way, way, way more valuable than it otherwise would be when you're just kind of poking around and like, touching parts of your game that like, maybe this is my problem. And the reality is like you're smashing in 3-bet pots out of position as a pre-flop raiser, right? But you dedicate time to studying that spot, taking it apart, and you're just messing with something that's working. And so ultimately, like the fruit of that labor is going to be very, very small, or maybe even negative, right? Like you could actually hurt yourself by tweaking or changing parts of your game that are performing really, really well unknowingly. And yeah, that makes all of this, by the way, is to say, just how incredible, in my opinion, and it was for the greats of the game who came up playing only live poker without any online poker, and really no mechanism to study the parts of their game where they were deficient. No mechanism to kind of pinpoint and target where they need to make upgrades, or how they're performing at various nodes in the game tree. You know, the Doyle Brunsons and, you know, the Negrenu's, you know, pre Phil Ivey, right? Another guy that was, you know, out there in the world just crushing souls pre online poker. Yeah, it's a testament to their mental strength and just their ability to believe in themselves when they're at the table, right? Because ultimately you have no choice. You have to be confident, even if you know that there are areas that you're leaking and could do better in. You still have no choice but to trust your intuition and do what you think is best, and let the chips, you know, kind of fall where they may. But in this day and age, it doesn't have to be that way. We can collect data, we can analyze our data, we can pinpoint these things and resolve leaks just way more efficiently than historically. But man, those guys, they just must have, you know, they're just made of steel. They're made of iron. Their resolve is just something that is immensely impressive to me. And as somebody that's kind of gone through, you know, I've been in the space for 20 years. It's just, I appreciate it so much. Like, it's like, man, those guys, they're made of something a little bit different than the rest of us.
For sure. Yeah. To survive poker without, you know, the solvers in the past, the data and the data collected to inform them with strategies. Coaches? To just go off of basic feel and instinct, like that's just incredible. I mean, most people are just going to fail playing that way.
Yeah, I mean, no coach, no performance coach, like just. Yeah, it's a crazy impressive achievement to me.
Yeah. Along that line, you know, one of the old school players, Daniel Negreanu, I find him just so fascinating, right? Like, to be able to take everything that he's learned over his last 20 years or however long he's been playing, and then after that, just be able to say, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
More like 30 to 40 years.
Yeah. But then to be able to say, you know what? The new superstars of poker today are 22, and you have no idea who they are because they're just some like online geniuses who have all the tools to study. And you know what? I'm going to be just as good at them. So I'm going to hire some GTO coaches and be able to learn different ways of thinking about poker, and then just combining all of that and playing his own brand of poker. Like that's pretty exciting to watch, you know, old guys adapt to the new style of playing.
Yeah. I mean, I think it shows a lot about Negrenu's value system. Right. I think it's clear that he values progression. He values learning, and he values self-improvement. And because of that value system, he isn't afraid to say, like, you know what, like, maybe I'm going about this wrong, or maybe, like, historically, this thing that I've been doing the past 15 years could be upgraded in some way, shape, or form by analyzing it, taking it apart, and just, you know, looking at poker through a totally different lens. And you know, he's in that way, again, it's an inspiration, right? That he's willing to do that. He's willing to take that risk because he doesn't have to. He has enough money. He has enough accolades. His spot in like the WSOP Hall of Fame, or, you know, the Poker Hall of Fame is secure and it's already there. So there's really nothing else that he needs to achieve to solidify his career, his place in the poker arena. But the reason why he's achieved so much, right, is just because of that internal drive to compete at the highest level he's capable of, and to progress and to learn on a year in and year out basis. That's ultimately, you know, his secret recipe to long-term success, is that he loves that aspect of the game. And you whether you love him or you hate him, you can't deny that is an integral part to Daniel Negreanu as a human being. And for the listener of the podcast, right? Like, if you love poker and you want to pursue poker at a high level, right? Like, think about Negrenu's career, think about his values, what he really loves and what he chases, and how he spends his time, because I think it's a decent template, a good blueprint for long-term success in the poker space.
Yeah. And, you know, speaking of the different methodologies that evolved over time, Chasing Poker Greatness has a different methodology that I guess fortunately or unfortunately, not enough people know about, right?
Yeah,
MDA.
MDA. So,
And yeah, I mean, like that's just like a really interesting topic. And you taught me so much about that perspective, and that's like the new lens that I look at poker in. And so thank you for that. But it'll be super fun, like I can see that taking off at some point where more and more poker players look into data as a way to update their strategies.
yeah, I mean, and it's a world that I've been immersed in again for, the past probably 2 years, right? But there's an interesting thing that happens, I think, in analyzing data and going about trying to understand the human beings that inhabit the world of poker through the lens of looking at massive amounts of data. And ultimately, like, I've come to some interesting conclusions. Like, I think MDA is great, and I think MDA is like a really great starting point, understanding how human beings react at various nodes of the game tree, having, kind of a pre-strategy right when you sit down, to exploit opponents' general tendencies. But then there's these other elements of playing poker that I think are also just as important, that I kind of got away from for a while, right? Like my Tactical Tuesday co-host, John, I've been in the mass data space for, like I said, only a couple of years, really, maybe 2.5 years now. When me and John started coaching together, I hadn't done any MDA work. I hadn't looked at poker through that lens at all. And he went from 100 no limit to 1K no limit in about 4 or 5 months online. He just progressed up the stakes very, very quickly. We didn't do any coaching sessions looking at it through the lens of data. And that always kind of stuck with me as this weird, like, thing, right? Where it's like, what the heck happened there? Like, what were we talking about? What did we do? Like, how did this happen? Right? Like, we were just like incredibly, like, was John just incredibly lucky? Was he just kind of like a savant when he first started playing online poker, and like he was going to make it, with or without me in that short amount of time? And what I've kind of learned is that, you need to have a balanced perspective. What we talked about before data was the thing that I was great at, that had allowed me to be a professional poker player, for the past 20 years. It was understanding micro data points, understanding, finding the flaws in villains' strategy that they're deploying at the table in real time, just understanding theoretically how the game works, and, when to use specific actions, when to use specific tools, against specific opponents in specific situations. And that was a driver to my success. And interestingly, when I moved to the world of MDA, I kind of put all that to the side, right? I kind of like almost forgot about my historic approach to playing the game, to play with this, new shiny toy that is exceptionally valuable. Again, don't get me wrong, but now, within the CPG Wolves program, one thing that we've recently done is kind of pull back in the theory and pull back in. Me and John are recording a series that's called Coach Brad's Brain, where essentially I'm trying to pour everything that I know about this game out of my head and explain it conceptually in ways that make sense. And we've only been doing this for the past like month and a half, but win rate last month collectively amongst the Wolves was 8 big blinds per 100. That's across, from very beginner Wolves who just started playing on contract to Wolves that, are playing 500 and 1K no limit. And then this month has been even better than last month, right? So it's just this reminder that you need, one thing just isn't good enough. Like, data is great. The problem with data is that poker is such a big game, and the strategies that you encounter in the wild vary to such a big degree that you have to be able to critically think on top of understanding what generally people do. And then when you understand generally what people do and somebody does something different, you've got to be able to counter that and construct a strategy in real time that allows you to be more dynamic and take advantage of the situation that you're in. So anyway, I know you kind of set me up there for the mass data analysis way of life, which again, I think is pretty much integral to anybody's pursuit of poker. It will,
Yep.
deepen your understanding of the humans you're playing against to a degree that is unbelievable. But, just like, I believe solvers, just like I believe, the old school Negreanu types that rely on intuition, there is no magic bullet. You must study poker from all of these different angles so that you can be holistically a stronger poker player. And again, like, be more dynamic in how you problem solve in real time. And ultimately, that's what it's going to take for people to be a crusher at this game at any level, maybe not at any level, but at the higher stakes online. That's just, it's almost what you have to do. So yeah, just little bit of got me touched a point that I've been thinking a lot about recently. And yeah, just I think it's important for the listener and the audience to kind of recognize, like, oh, I need to understand this game from a theoretical standpoint. I need to understand it from a fundamental standpoint. And I also need to be able to think dynamically and think critically and take things into consideration. Like, this dude I'm playing live poker against started out as one player. Over 10 hours, they've kind of morphed into a different player based on how their session is going on that night, which, again, Jay, you're the only one. If you're sitting there at that table, you're the only one that can take advantage of the context of that situation and play the hands to the best of your ability. And if you can't think dynamically, right, then you're never going to ultimately find the best path to take. So yeah, the CPG courses, the CPG way has been built on mass data analysis. And I think it's a great foundational starting point. And to me, I look at it kind of like, armor or like a shield where it's defensive, right? Like, if you deploy this strategy in this spot and you don't know anything about anything, you're protected. Like, it will protect you from just getting absolutely destroyed in those spots. But you also need to pay attention to the specificity of the situation so that you can kind of go beyond the data in that sense. So anyway, yeah, this is, again, 2 years, all I've thought about is coaching and teaching other players. So yeah, it kind of got me on a roll there.
Yeah. Just a shout out to you. I mean, I just learned so much about poker from you from a variety of different lenses that, the CBG courses have been immensely helpful. And yeah, just realized, or just encourage anybody that if they don't know about that stuff, if they're listening to this podcast, like, go check out the website and go check out what's offered.
Appreciate it, man. Appreciate it. So, moving along, what would you say have the scripted questions, the old reliables that I haven't touched in a while? What's been the most unexpected thing that's come from your journey in the world of poker?
Ooh, it's easy. Poker is the easiest. What is it, that thing that the people say, like, poker is the hardest way to make easy money, something like that?
It's a hard way to make an easy living. Hard way to make it. And
like when things are going great, gosh, poker is just like the easiest thing in the world. You just show up, you make thousands of dollars an hour. And it's just like, you just feel like it's gonna last forever. And reality is it just doesn't. So I guess when I'm playing like 2-5 or even 5-10, my percentage of sessions won, my hourly, they're fairly, the variance of my results are fairly compressed. And so it's almost predictable and you feel really, really good. Whereas this year, I've kind of just really pushed myself to keep moving up in stakes, where the downside, the level of competition I'm playing and also the downside in results have just been quite surprising. You know what I mean? Like, it's really pushed me towards the edge of my negative emotions and a negative self-talk, where like that part has just, it's finally hitting me where I'm like, gosh, like, is this the limit? Like, is this my limit? Like, is this going to be the highest stakes that I'll ever be able to play? And of course, I don't believe that it will be. But it is a question that you start asking yourself, so I would say that's one of the surprising things. I just never thought that a downswing would impact me as much as it has had. But, at the same time, I'm a competitor and I want to fight through it. And if I have to make adjustments to move down a stakes, like, I don't have the ego to not be able to do so. At the end of the day, I'm, a big driver of me playing is, yes, I want to be the best poker player that I can be. But it's also to make money. And if I have to move down to make a higher hourly, then that's what I do. And I won't have an ego that will prevent me from doing so. I would say that's like one of the big surprises. Other than that, I mean, the amount that you can learn, like I am still learning every single session that I play. In my bankroll app, I can record hands, and it's like a general notes section. And for me, when I play live, I just really want to pay attention to the game. But every single mistake that I make in real time that I realize is a mistake, I start recording it right away so I can look at it after the session. And it's like every single session I'm making a mistake, and I don't punish myself really hard because I don't expect to ever play perfect. But it is something that I come back and I'm like, oh, wow, like, this is a mistake, but I've learned so much from it. Like I actually didn't know the answer was, maybe I thought the answer was A, but the answer is really B. And by being able to write down notes, I'm able to learn so much more after it. But yeah, I think the surprising thing is like there's just such a large amount to learn in poker. Like you can't just play for 2 years and think you're just going to be on top of the world. I mean, I think you can play for 10 years and still constantly find new areas of the game tree where there's a more optimal solution out there.
Yeah, over 20 years in now, and have probably I've thought about poker strategy as much as anybody, and I still learn, right? Like I'm still learning on like a daily basis, right? And I can afford to sit and think about poker because again, like I haven't played full time. I haven't been making tons of content. I have only been coaching and thinking about poker strategy and thinking about putting my wolves in a position to be successful on the felt with their careers. And yeah, even me who has thought about poker again, probably as much as anybody in the past couple of years, at least the strategy side of it. Yeah, still learning on a daily basis, still learning little subtle nuances and ways to communicate things. Just sometimes, what's great about coaching high level players and being immersed in the group is sometimes they'll say something that like hits me and I'm like, oh, wow, that's really smart. Like I never actually thought about it that way. And then I have to, calibrate my own internal understanding of a spot, or that question will allow me to go deeper and resolve some sort of misunderstanding or misconception that I had previously had. So like, this game is, again, it's really big. It's a really big game tree. There's always so much more to learn. And anybody that is like, oh, I got it all figured out. I don't need to study. I don't need to learn. Like you are setting yourself up for absolute and total failure. Like you are going to get demolished if that is your mindset. And it's a thing that like, you see in card rooms around the country where people will just kind of get to where they can beat poker at an hourly rate that they're satisfied with. And they just stagnate. They stop growing. Yeah. They stop learning. They turn off that sense of curiosity and learning. And before you know it, their hourly rate is negative and they can't get out of that. They just can't, they can't evolve because they've let themselves deteriorate over time. So yeah, you have to constantly learn. And that's that, again, going back to Negreanu, right? This is the thing. If he wants to be competitive, if he wants to play 250Ks against the best tournament players in the world and not look like a fool, he has to continue to evolve. He can't take 10 years off because you will not be competitive if you do in this arena. Because I can tell you, the kids that have, their only purpose in this world right now is playing poker at the highest level they possibly can. That's all they think about. Yeah. They're not taking 10 years off. They are fresh. They are technically fundamentally sound. They are looking for any sort of edge that they can possibly get. You take 10 years off, you stop evolving, you're giving them an edge. You're just like outright handing them an edge. So yeah. Like so it isn't unexpected for the next decade of your career. You're still going to be learning in 10 years. You'll still be shocked at how much you're continually learning over time.
And that's what keeps the game interesting for me. Just like constantly looking at my database and going, cool. Like that's a spot that I want to get better at because, you can't, you just, one of the things you also said to me once a while back is like, you just can't you just can't make a big, vast in your technical understanding of the game. Like it just takes time. So ever since then, I've just been focusing on spots. Like, all right, here's a spot where I'm a loser. Cool. Like, get better at it. Play it differently. Like, figure out how to win. Like, ask other good poker players like how they see the situation. And then, especially if they have a database, like being open to sharing numbers and figuring out who does it the best, and let's trade. Let's trade how we play certain spots, so that way we can both be better in those spots. Um, I think that's the thing that makes poker super fun for me. Like, there is a path to getting better. You don't have to be a victim of, like losing poker results.
Yeah, for sure. If you're willing to be comfortable, if be uncomfortable, if you're willing to put yourself out there and have the wherewithal to essentially admit that, like, I need help. I'm struggling here. I don't really understand what's going on. And I think that's, I guess I've been very blessed that is how I'm set by default, that if I don't understand something, that I don't understand it. I don't want to pretend as if I do understand it if I don't. And I look at those as, entry points to getting better as a coach, getting better as a player, getting better as a human being, right? Like, just outside of poker, right? There are things, I know this will be a big shock to the podcast audience and the YouTube audience. I mess up all the time. I have ginormous leaks in everything that I do. There's so many different areas that I could get better at. It's not a surprise that, if you were to look on my bookshelf, most of the books back there are some category of like self-help, because I need the help. I need all the self-help that I could possibly get. And I recognize where I'm weak and where I need to grow. And so I would say that for the listener, like, really just take that and run with it, and recognize that, like, hey, my blind spots, the areas where I'm weak, let's investigate that. Let's try to see if I can upgrade, see if I can do a little bit better, and just remove the ego out of the equation. And you'd be amazed at the amount of progress you can make over time.
Yep.
All right. So back to the ye old question list here. You've talked a lot about the downswing. Tell me about, joy in your career playing cards. When you think about joy, what's the first memory that comes to mind?
Honestly, anytime that my wife it wasn't a coincidence. Like, when within a week of, my boss had known for months. Like, I told him, hey, this year I'm going to leave the company. Like, I was real honest. Being in a position that I was in, I needed to make sure that someone would be able to take over, and for me not to feel bad about departing. So my boss had known for months, and he knew that at any moment I would leave. But, we had spent the year recruiting, that kind of stuff. And as soon as my wife found out she was pregnant, within like a week after that, I departed from the company. And the greatest joy from being a poker player is that, you're a business owner. So yes, you're going to work extremely hard on your business, but at the same time, you have full control over when you get to leave. Right. And just an example, during this downswing, it's been really, really tough. I've just been trying to play through it. And my whole thing is like, volume cures variance. So just put in a lot of volume and let's get out of this thing. But then my wife is noticing that I'm just, like, mentally, I'm just not there, and I look a little worn out. I'm not getting enough sleep. And I'm just a little too obsessed. And she's like, you know what? Why don't we just take a week and go out to Chicago? And I'm like, cool. And we're just able to just up and go with our family, like my wife, myself, and our son. We had a blast in Chicago. And then I came back and I'm like, I'm ready to play again. Like, this, like, I really want to play. Like, I'm looking forward to getting to the table, socializing, and just, putting my best game on the floor. Like, being able to take multiple vacations like that throughout the year with no one to report to other than myself, like, that's just super exciting. And if you're able to make poker work for you that way, that's certainly one of the biggest advantages of owning your own business.
Yeah, I agree. And as it relates to, volume cures all things, I think there's a caveat. Good volume, high level volume.
Yeah, good volume,
things,
right?
When you're just putting in volume for the sake of volume, at least in my experience, more bad things tend to happen. So really good for your wife recognizing, Jay needs a break. Like, let's go do something fun, get him outside of the world of poker for a week so that he can come back rejuvenated, refreshed, and ready to rock and roll. And that's another thing too. I think that poker players a lot of times don't want to take time away from playing poker. They don't want to go on vacation. They feel lazy for not putting in volume. And the reality is, like, if you want to make it in this game long term, you've got to get away. You have to give yourself breaks so that you can come back fresh, with, you know, excitement and more vigorous and ready to kind of bear down and invest a lot of energy. Because ultimately, ultimately you train too much, you play too much, you get burned out, and the game stops being fun. The game stops being fun. Well, that's not a great paradigm to be in when, you know, you could have front ran that by simply taking more breaks, going on more vacation, having more fun, you know, in your life. So what would you say is something that you feel folks who are chasing their poker dreams don't spend enough time thinking about?
Let's start with like what the variables are to poker success, right? The quality of games that you either have access to or get into, that's just going to be one of the biggest variables. That's something I've taken for granted for sure. And only like very recently, I'm re-looking at the quality of games that I play in and really asking myself, how do I get into better quality games? But that's super key. A productive study routine. So it's really easy to dedicate 20 hours a week to studying. Somebody can say, hey, I'm going to spend 2 to 4 hours every day to study. It's very easy to do that. But like, how do you exactly extract information out of that bucket of time? That's super key. And to be honest with you, I don't think until very, very recently, I knew how to study, right? Because you can go over hands, but it's like, are you really, you can go over a hand and say, okay, I could have played that hand better. But I think people who are really, really good at poker or who have the guidance of a coach or a team that helps them think about poker, they don't just go, how do I play this hand better? But what is the classification of this hand? And how do we even think about playing all of these hands better within this bucket, right? Like those guys just get so much more out of every hour of studying. And I don't think most poker players are able to think about studying and getting better in that aspect. But I think that would be the second thing. And the third thing that I don't think people get, and I see this all the time in the games that I play at, but bankroll management, you think it's just like so simple, but I see it all the time. Like guys are just going broke and disappearing for months. And that's a real thing. So maybe they got success at a certain level stake, they move up and then they just get crushed, but forget that they have to move down. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff just like crushes poker players because I mean, downswings are really, really tough. It's really easy to lose 10 buy-ins. I don't think people realize, I just don't think people realize how easy it is to lose 10, 20 buy-ins when, you know, you do research online, how many buy-ins do you need for a game? And on most sites, they'll say 20 to 25, but I just don't think people understand how easy it is to go on a 10, 15 buy-in swing, downswing.
I mean,
But yeah, those are the three
50,
things that I think.
50 has been my bankroll thing that I followed forever. It's like 50 buy-ins, and that's what I need to feel safe. But yeah, hit the ball, you know, out of the park. I think that ego comes into play quite often in those situations where somebody goes broke. They lack discipline in bankroll management. If they lack discipline in bankroll management, which is kind of fundamental to setting yourself up for success, I would be willing to go out on a limb and say that they lack discipline in other areas as well, such as playing when they're tired, such as, you know, not kicking the stakes up just to kick the stakes up when it's an uncomfortable limit, like either exiting the game or declining to kick the stakes up again. I think that these are just kind of ego driven type things that people feel uncomfortable doing, or maybe they just want to play way bigger just for the gamble aspect of it. But I mean, yeah, like you have to protect yourself first and foremost. And again, going back to the real goal of playing poker, the real goal is to play as long as you can possibly play. If you're a professional, you know, the goal is to play next month, next year, next decade. Always have a path to playing poker, and anything that jeopardizes that, you just have to assess the risk and be willing to say, no, I'm not going to take that risk. It's just too much for me to manage. And I think that, you know, we've kind of become in a way, like poker's kind of become this space where the people who take these outsized risks with their bankroll become almost like folk heroes. right? They become like these like fearless icons of the game that are just like, oh man, look at this guy. He's just like, he loses 500K in a night. Like, wow, that's crazy, right? Like, but it's like, I think that we've just kind of honored the wrong thing as a community over time, where, you know, I believe that there was in high stakes poker, there's a famous hand with David Benjamin versus Guy Laliberte, the founder of Cirque du Soleil, where essentially, you know, they get the money in on the flop and it's like a flip. Basically, I think it's like a flip. It's like a flush draw versus a set or something along those lines. I can't remember the exact spot, but come to find out, like, Benjamin was like, he had like 100% of himself. And that was like everything that he had in the world on the table in this spot in like a flip against a billionaire. Right.
Yeah.
And it's just like, again, I haven't heard David Benjamin in a while, and I don't know what he's up to. I don't know if he's even in poker anymore. I have no idea where his story led, but you put yourself in that position one time, you're probably going to put yourself in that position multiple times. And while from the outside looking in, it looks appealing, right? It looks tantalizing. It's kind of sexy. For the people that actually put themselves out there like that, the downside is so huge. It's so massive that it just kind of becomes sad to me that that's the thing that becomes like prestigious in the world of poker. Like, wow, look at this guy. Like, he's willing to put it all in the felt and play for his whole net worth in one game. Yep. Like, that to me is like, it's crazy. I don't think it's sexy, although there's a piece of me, my inner degenerate, that's like, oh wow, look at, like, I want to watch. I want to see what happens, because, you know, it's kind of like a car crash, right? It is essentially what you're looking for. But yeah, like I think that just, you have to be disciplined in these areas, and you can know better all you want, but you've got to be disciplined when the situation happens to you. And that's where I think the major failure point is, especially for like young professional poker players that kind of, you know, learn from other guys that that kind of do all the things wrong that you're trained not to do, but then somehow seem to be like, okay, at the end of it. And they're like, oh, well, it's not so bad. Like, going to the pit and like dusting off money, like here or there, it's not so bad. Like, he does it, and he's famous and he's very successful, right? You have to resist that temptation, and you have to be a pro ultimately. And if you're not, bad things will happen to you over time. You will cut your career short. It's kind of inevitable. So anyway, I think bankroll management, as you said, really big deal. Just being disciplined in managing your risk, because that's essentially what you are if you're pursuing the path of poker at a high level. You've got to understand risk, manage your risk well. And if you don't, especially as it relates to your bankroll, bad shit's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What would you say some common poker advice you hear that you disagree with?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I think there's an expectation where get good at a game. Here's actually a really good one. And for some reason, this guy just struck right into my mind because he becomes the really best example. I think that poker, just like any endeavor, there isn't a rope. Like, success in poker doesn't, like, my success in poker doesn't have to be your successful in poker. Like, the things that, like, poker is a really interesting sport where, just like many other things, but you can make it what you want it to be. So just because my aspiration in poker is to make it into the high stakes and nosebleeds games doesn't mean that has to be someone else's. And there's someone else that I'm thinking in mind right now. Let's just call him Jay also, because that's his initial. But he's a clear full-time pro. He's clearly very good at the game. But he's married with children, and he lives a very outdoorsy life. I have never seen him play more than higher than 1-3. And I remember thinking a while back, like, why isn't this guy playing bigger? Until one day I realized that his hourly is probably really, really good at 1-3. His stress level is probably close to 0. And when I look at his social media, 0 references to poker. but a gazillion references to his wife and his kids, and they're always doing fun stuff, right? And so I look at that example, I'm like, man, this guy made it, and there might not be a higher level of success unless he finds out another game with similar win or better win rates with the same level of risk. But he's made it. Like, there are a lot of guys who, for poker, like that's the highest level of success, and it's like really cool to just see what poker can be for a lot of people. And so going back to your question, I think some people are like, get good at the game, move up. Well, that's just not the right situation for every single person.
Yeah. So understand what you value, right?
Yeah.
And then pursue your own values. There's a story about a Mexican fisherman, and I don't want to say the whole story because I know that I'm going to butcher it, because it's kind of, but it's very in the same vein as to what you described, right? And I have to go. I can't just tell the audience about a story and then not even try, right? So forgive me if I destroy the story. But Mexican fisherman, he's fishing. He takes a charter out with these tourists from America. They catch fish. They go back. He prepares the fish on the beach. They're playing music with his family, with his friends. Everybody's dancing. He serves the meal to the tourist. The tourist eats it and says, "Wow, this is the best meal that I've ever had in my life. Like this is incredible." He's like, "You know what we should do? Like, we should catch a bunch of fish, right? We should essentially create a business on top of what you're doing here, and build this business and grow it. And we can build franchises. We can get it in, every restaurant or department store in America. We can scale." And at every question, at every idea, the Mexican fisherman is saying, "Well, why? Why are we going to build a business? Oh, because, you'll make millions of dollars. Why are we going to expand to this? Oh, because then you'll have a franchise. You'll be able to sell it to somebody else for, more millions and millions of dollars." And then, the fisherman's like, "Well, then what will I do at the end of all this? Like, well, once everything is sold." And he's like, "Well, you'll do whatever you want to do." And he's like, "Well, what I want to do is I want to go out on a charter with new people, catch fish, go back home, prepare the fish, dance on the beach with my family and friends and loved ones, and live my life." Right? Like, and the clear moral is he's already living his best life. He doesn't need all the bullshit of just building a business, selling it, making millions of dollars, pursuing this, 30-year plan that essentially takes him away from doing what he loves every single day for 30 years, right? So again, like understand what drives you, understand the life that you would like to live, and you don't have to pursue anybody else's dream. You don't have to be Jay, you don't have to be Negreanu, you don't have to be me, right? You can just forge your own path, be happy with it. And ultimately, I don't know of anything else that is a better marker for success than achieving the things that give you joy, being able to live a life that gives you joy on a daily basis, right?
Yep.
All right. So books. If you could gift every poker player one book to read, what book would you gift them?
The one book that I've gotten the most utility out of, and it looks like I've mentioned different Downswings multiple times during this podcast, but there's a really well-known book called Mental Game of Poker by Jared Tendler, I believe. And every time I'm going through a tough month, I go back to that book. And the last time that I went through that book was like maybe 2 months ago. And I went through a Mental Game of Poker, the second edition. So there's some overlap between part 1 and part 2, but I specifically went over part 2. And I remember I was on a flight to somewhere on vacation, and I get to this chapter where he talks about your strategic vision for poker. And I don't know why he used that certain words, but there was a certain framework and a certain exercise that he wanted the audience to take. And long story short, it's essentially identifying your A-level poker, B-level poker, and C-level poker across 4 to 6 different variables. So for example, pre-flop ranges, your sizing, your table selection, and then envisioning and then defining what is your A level, B level, C level, right? And then the whole output of the exercise is that once you complete the exercise, every single orbit, you get to reflect and bring awareness to whatever level of poker you're playing across these different categories of poker. And for me, the way that I've systematized that framework to my game is that every time I get the button, I ask myself, what level of poker am I playing? And I've just made it a strong commitment that if I make 3 level C mistakes, I'm just going to quit the session. It doesn't matter if the game is going great. Like this is the best quality game I'll ever be in. The reality is if I'm not pushing to play A level or B level at the worst, and I'm playing like losing poker, which is what I call my C level, then just don't play. Like you don't have to play. So that's the one book that I would give to people. I mean, there's no book that I have that I've gone through as many times as that book.
Yeah, Jared Tindler, multiple time CBG guest. For the listener, go check out that book. And don't want to forget Barry Carter either. He's co-author. He's perpetual co-author in the poker space. I love me some Barry Carter. So shout out to Barry and his co-author of a bunch of other books, Dara O'Kearney. So good stuff. Mental game of poker. Gonna wind down now. So just some lightning round to end the conversation.
Good.
Yeah, if you could wave a magic wand, change one thing about poker, what would you change?
I mentor a lot of like 2-5, 1-3, and 1-2 players. And I tell them over and over again, the game is going to die unless the socialization goes up at the table. So my experience of why certain games don't last long, and I'm kind of referring to my experience in Texas poker, but I really see it in Vegas as well. But there's certain stakes, like let's say 2-5 or 5-10, where the table is just way too quiet. It's not inviting. I just think big headphones, especially, is really bad for the game and really bad for the table. Whereas conversely, someone who is socializing with new players to sit down is great for the game. It opens up ranges and it makes the game more exciting. But if I can wave a magic wand, the ability for especially the winning players to socialize more and make the game more fun, providing that service to new players, like that would make poker a more popular sport. But I think that certain games can be way too competitive and guys are just trying to actualize way too much of their EV, where I don't think they know of it. This is not online poker where volume can feel a little bit infinite. In live cash, volume can be a little bit fragile, where games can break if it's not exciting for lesser skilled players. And so, just trying to keep that thing in mind and trying to make poker fun for everyone at the table. Like if I can wave a magic wand and make sure that the best players in the pool understand that, I think the game would be better for them and also for newer comers to poker.
Yeah, and I mean, unfortunately, the problem is that the upside is not so obvious, especially in the immediate future. The downside comes in the longer term future, because essentially poker, when somebody's playing poker recreationally, right, and they have a loss rate, so they're expected to lose over time when they play this game. They need to get something out of playing, right? Like what's the thing that they can get out of it, right? They can get out of it a good experience. They can get out of it camaraderie, a fun time, a fun night out, right? Like nobody has problems, assuming that you have liquidity to burn, going out with your friends, going to some bars, spending $200 or $300 night out on the town, having fun, right? Like nobody has any problem doing that because they have a good experience doing it, right? So when we're talking about people that are losing thousands of dollars playing poker, and they enjoy playing poker, like, and they are expected to lose, like, they should have a good experience when they play, because like that's what they get out of it. And whenever you just have your headphones on, whenever you're not social, you don't talk to people, you don't make them feel welcome, they don't have a good experience, right? Because essentially, why should they, right? Why would they have a good experience doing this? And so ultimately, kind of, I think what has happened is due to the privatization of games, people play game runners have essentially tried to target players that make for or pros that make the game fun, right? Or
Yep.
pros that people want to play with, just big
Mhm.
name pros that they just want to compete against, that sort of thing. But
Yep.
ultimately, like, they've essentially said, hey, you guys that aren't providing really anything to the experience of the game, you're not
Mhm.
invited and you can't play anymore. Now, the downside of that is very obvious for the
Mhm.
professional poker player. It's very tangible and very real and very obvious.
Yep.
So what, I completely agree with what you're saying. And I would just say that, like, yeah, again, you want to play this game for a long time, you're really skilled at it. Well, you got to think long term, and the
Mhm.
long term deal with poker is to make it more fun and make it a better experience for the people that you play against. So you should probably go about doing that, in
Yeah.
a way that is authentic too. I think you
For sure.
can also
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
about it
Mhm.
in an authentic, kind of patronizing type of way that, honestly, I think if you're going to go about it that way, just put the headphones on and don't really say anything, because it kind
Yeah.
of makes it worse. But
Mhm.
yeah, that's sorry. I went off on a tangent in the lightning round, but I'm gonna
Yep.
bring it back. I'm gonna bring it back. So if you could put up a billboard on the side of the road that every poker player's got to drive past on their way to the casino or card room, what does Jay's billboard say?
Enjoy your suited aces. You'll get there.
Enjoy Ace Five suited.
Don't fold suited aces.
Go all in
John
with
might
every
John might
suited
like that
ace all
one.
the time. It's just a flush draw waiting to happen. It's a nut flush
You
draw
know,
waiting to happen.
it always gets there.
Yeah. Um, what's a project you're currently working on right now that's near and dear to your heart?
Yeah, a couple things like number one, I just completed 50K hands of 200 NL. Break even, unfortunately not the result that I wanted. I think it was like negative 0.3 BB per 100 or something like that. But that was combined of 200 NL and 500 NL. So to be a break even player in those two stakes combined, um, I'm not like disappointed by it. It's just more so of like, okay, like great. The next 50K hands, I need to beat this. Like I don't have an excuse. I have a database. I know what spots I'm losing money. Time to turn this thing around, right? And then put in another 50K for whatever the rest of the year or next upcoming year, and then trying to figure this thing out. But that's really gonna be something exciting to me. I plan on recording a lot of it and just putting out the highlight hands on social media so people can join me on that adventure. So that's number one. And then number two, restarting YouTube again. Now that my mom is healthy, first thing I want to prioritize is getting out of this downswing. But as soon as I'm out of this downswing, like I've already partitioned out Sundays to be my social media day. And I'm just looking forward to just really getting back on YouTube, because I always felt like that was a thing where I got the success that I didn't expect. And even though it was like very, very small success, for me, it was just so big because it was something I've always wanted to do. And that there was some traction there that I kind of let go of my foot off the pedal, that, I think I can make something special out of it. So looking forward to getting back on YouTube
Yeah.
as soon as I can.
Absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Yeah.
Very nice, man. And you and I, we've talked a lot. I've released a course recently, Live Cash Preflop Bootcamp,
Yeah.
that for folks in the live arena, I definitely believe should check it out. You've taken the course yourself, and
Mhm.
you have an affiliate code that you've sent a number of your proteges my way to Live Cash Preflop Bootcamp.
Nothing but great reviews, by the way. They all love it. And we talk about it on the side.
Thank you.
So really, really good, really, really good stuff that you do not get anywhere else.
Thanks, man. Appreciate
Mhm.
that. As I said, my marketing hasn't been so great. My content creation has been subpar, outside of Tactical Tuesday, but Tactical Tuesday is actually, it kind of ties into like what I do on a daily basis anyway. It's like
Mhm.
I talk strategy all the time, so Tactical Tuesday is kind of like an extension of that. But yeah, what I've done the last 2 years is strategize and understand how to communicate information effectively to other human beings, build out strategies that make money.
Yeah.
And Live Cash Preflop Bootcamp is the preflop strategy that I suggest every single wolf who plays live poker deploy. Now,
Mhm.
there are some, internal quirks and other things that we kind of tinker with the Wolves program, but man, very, very tough to deploy a stronger strat organically than live cache preflop bootcamp. And so with that said, the final question here is, if the podcast listener, the YouTuber, wants to learn more about you, where can they find you on the World Wide Web?
Yeah, you can. Instagram is probably the best way to get a hold of me. My Instagram is JWIN Poker. That's JWIN. Or if you want to hear my thoughts that I never put out, I'm also on Twitter, except my handle there is JVWin. That's JAYVNGUYEN.
Very nice. And YouTube, right? That's
and then my YouTube is JWIN Poker.
JWIN Poker. There will be a link in the show notes, so you can click through, subscribe to Jay's channel. Jay, always a pleasure having conversations with you, interacting with you. You're one of my favorite people in the poker space, and pleasure and honor. We'll have you back on in the very near future, probably for a Tactical Tuesday. I think we're going to set up for a Tactical Tuesday, and happy to be a part of your YouTube content as well in the future.
Yeah, absolutely, Brad. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure, man. Take care.
Take care.
This is Chasing Poker Greatness with your host, Brad Wilson. Coach Brad approved. Are you a lone wolf searching for the ultimate pack? The CPG Wolf program is a close-knit brotherhood hell-bent on one thing only: chasing poker greatness. Powered by bleeding-edge wolf strats and led by Coach Brad and his lieutenants, CPG Wolves are systematically prepared for almost any spot they'll encounter on the green felt. If you want to plug into an elite team and have a step-by-step game plan to realize your full poker potential, you can apply at cpgwolves.com. Space is limited, and the pack is only as strong as its weakest member. So only the hungriest, grittiest, and most driven will be accepted into the program. Applications are open at cpgwolves.com.